This is the Kashmir India's government wants the world to see. Beautiful, serene, full of tourists. Away from sight is the more grim picture. A painful, long-running conflict, and more recently, a clampdown on democratic rights. Journalists who can bring out people's voices and ground realities say they're now being silenced by the government. Asif Sultan, a Kashmiri reporter, pictured here at one of his court hearings. He's been in jail for 5 years, charged under terror laws. His father Muhammad says Asif was targeted for this article he wrote about an anti-India militant.
Even police know.
Everyone knows he's innocent. He's a professional reporter and was jailed for his writing about the militancy. They wanted to make an example out of him, so other journalists don't dare to cover topics the government doesn't approve of.
At the time of his arrest, Asif's daughter was just 6 months old. Ariba might have been reunited with her father when he was given bail last year. But on the day of his release, new charges were brought. Asif was kept in jail. It's part of a troubling pattern. Journalist Sajjad Gul, jailed for criminal conspiracy. Well-known magazine editor Fahad Shah, arrested on terrorism charges. Whenever they're granted bail, new cases are filed to keep them in custody. Most recently, Irfan Miraj, who's worked with multiple international outlets, jailed for alleged links to terror funding. This complex, which now houses an office of the Kashmir Police, until last year, this is where Kashmir's press club used to be, the main body in the region which used to stand up for the rights of journalists. Last year, it was shut down by the government, and in its absence, journalists say they have nowhere to turn to if they feel threatened. And it isn't just jailing. We've heard of other forms of intimidation. Dozens of journalists in this region are on no-fly lists, prevented from leaving the country. Dozens of journalists have not had their passports renewed. We've spoken to 20 journalists on the ground, each of whom have told us that they've been called by the police and questioned about stories that they've done or social media posts that they've put out. This reporter told us about one such experience. He doesn't want to be identified, fearing reprisal.
I started getting calls from the police over a story I had written. They kept asking why I had done it. Then I was questioned in person. They told me they know everything about me and my family, which felt very scary. I kept thinking, would I be arrested or harmed physically?
And what impact has that had on your journalism?
Instead of thinking about whether I have enough facts in a report, I worry more about whether it will land me in trouble. We are all self-censoring. There is an attempt to silence the press in Kashmir once and for all.
Most journalists told us they fear reprisal by the state. But in a conflict between Indian forces and underground militant outfits, some say there are other dangers too. I spoke to a journalist who received threats from an insurgent group.
Working as a journalist in Kashmir is like walking on a razor's edge. There are threats from all sides. I'm constantly afraid of a bullet coming at me, and that no one will ever find out who fired that.
The impact on journalism is evident when you look at the papers on any given day. The front pages are pretty much full of statements from either the national government or the regional administration. There are lots of soft stories, but there's barely any journalism in here holding the government to account. We asked the police and the regional administration to respond to the allegations made by journalists who spoke to us. They haven't replied. In press statements, the administrative head of the region has insisted that there's absolute press freedom in Kashmir.
In Jammu Kashmir, press enjoys absolute freedom. More than 400 newspapers are being published from Jammu Kashmir. I also want to point out that according to a report by an international organization, total 7 journalists were detained and arrested in India on terror charges and attempts to disruption of social harmony, not for journalism or for writing stories.
What we found belies the claims. On ground in Kashmir, press freedom has always